Right, so welcome to today's webinar, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about making council websites accessible, and we're going to be talking a little bit about WCAG 2.2 as well. So let's go ahead and look at today's agenda. So we're going to have a quick intro, just so that I'm not a complete stranger to you, and then we'll go ahead and hop into the main meat of the webinar. We'll be looking at the state of your websites and some data around that, and then some of the most common accessibility challenges that you guys are facing, and then how to fix them. Then we'll be taking a little bit of a look at WCAG 2.2, which is coming later this year, and some of the things to be aware of there. And then we'll end up with a Q&A at the end. So do feel free to use the Q&A feature in Zoom and ask questions throughout the webinar as they pop into your head. That's perfectly fine. We'll answer them all at the end, or at least as many as we can. Yeah, so just feel free to ask questions throughout the whole thing. Also, as a quick primer, this is not intended to be a super technical webinar, so I'm not going to be going into code and developer stuff. If you do want us to do something like that in future, then do let us know, and we'll go ahead and take a look at that down the line and do another webinar at some point, perhaps. But for now, it's going to be a little more accessible to everybody, no matter your skill level and knowledge level. So, who am I? My name is Adam Womersley, and I'm the written and audio content creator here at Silktide. And for those who can't see me or just don't want to, I'm wearing glasses, wearing my Silktide t-shirt, and I'm representing the Silktide brand. I've only been working at Silktide for a couple of months now, but I've been working in various marketing roles across content management since 2015. So we're going to be taking a look at the state of your websites currently. You know, don't worry, we're not going to be looking at yours specifically and calling people out or anything like that. We're just going to be looking at some data from the Silktide Index. So what is the Silktide Index? If you didn't know, it's essentially our league table, which shows how organizations across various different industries compare for web accessibility. So it includes both, a wide range of public and private sector sites across different locations and all sorts. There's so much data that we capture in there, and it works using our automated web testing software to test and score sites against WCAG 2.1, which is the globally recognized standards for web accessibility. So after that kind of spiel of where we're getting this information from, what do your websites look like? Well, actually, they look quite good. We did these tests in May 2021. We did them again in May 2022, and we compared those results. And in both cases, you'll be interested to know that the top 20 websites were UK local government websites, followed very closely by UK central government and UK universities. So that's fantastic to kind of see that. But what we also found was really interesting was the results that we got in May 2021 and May 2022. The scores still increased as we went, which was really interesting because it shows that there's still room for improvement, and there is improvement being made over the past 12 months, which is fantastic. So we're doing great. That means job well done, right? That means we can move on to other things, not worry about accessibility. We can just kind of go ahead and move on. Well, not quite. There's, of course, there's still a lot of areas where accessibility could and should be improved. And obviously on top of that, we've got WCAG 2.2 on the horizon, expected to come later this year. And there's certainly a few things worth preparing for there. So let's take a look at some of the more difficult areas that you guys are struggling. Again, this data is coming from the Silktide Index, so we can see a bunch of the areas that people are struggling most within your sector. So let's go ahead and do that. So I've collated this into a top 10 list just to make it easy and simple. And there's a few things on here which are pretty easy and self-explanatory. Other things which are a bit more complex. And before we go through each one, I did say that it wasn't going to be a technical webinar today, so I'm going to go ahead and strike off those bottom two. They're a bit more technical. So now it's more of a top 8 list. It's not quite as catchy. But having said that, we also don't really have a lot of time today, especially considering these random tech issues that we're having right now. I'm going to go ahead and strike off a few more. So it is more of a top 4 list. Let's just pretend it says top 10, and it's and it's fine, and it sounds all catchy. You know, there's a lot of things you know, that we could go through today. It would take all day. We could pretty much write a book about it, and in fact, that we actually did do that. If you haven't read this already, you can. You know, so yeah. Just on this, throughout this webinar, I am going to have links in throughout this deck. Don't worry about copying them down. Don't worry about transcribing them. We will be sharing the slides with you at the end of this webinar, and you can easily access these in your own time if you wanted some further reading, if you wanted to. So that's just a bit of a disclaimer. Don't worry about trying to scribble these down before I move on. So before we jump into that first point on our top 4 list, I wanted to establish a very brief understanding of what a screen reader is, since I will be talking about screen reader quite a few times throughout this webinar. It just, you know, it's pretty helpful when we're thinking about accessibility and you know, page navigation. So I just wanted to establish that kind of base understanding. So a screen reader is a form of assistive technology, and it essentially just reads out the content of a web page to you. So for users who are blind or have low vision, or even users with cognitive disabilities, screen readers are a really essential piece of technology for browsing the web. And what's smart is that they'll actually read some kind of hidden information, which a visual user wouldn't be able to perceive on your web page, which further help describe certain elements and what they are or what they look like and their purpose. And we'll look at some examples of this shortly. But one example would be things like alt text, right? Which would just describe what an image looks like. And a screen reader would read that out, even though a visual user wouldn't, you know, kind of see that text on the page. And it's pretty easy to test. We do have a free Chrome plugin. You can go ahead and download that, and you know, in a simple click, you can kind of just listen to what your website is like from a screen reader perspective. So yeah, give that a test. Again, I'll have some links and stuff at the end of this webinar, but yeah, that's worth testing out if you're kind of worried about that. So let's think about the way that we navigate through web pages, right? You know, as a visual user myself, you can probably relate. I don't want to read all of the content on a web page because I'm impatient and I just want to get to where I need to get to and find what I want to find as fast as possible. So I'll skim read. I'll find what I need, and I'll move on. And users who rely on screen readers, well, they're no different. You know, they want to save time. They don't want to wait for a screen reader to read out every single line and every single bit of content on a web page just so they can find one link they need to get to. So they don't need to. Screen readers are pretty clever. So they can actually skip and navigate between very specific page elements instead of one thing after the other. So they could, for example, skip between headers, or they could jump between links on the page. So I've just shown some screenshots here, which are from Yoast's website, and it, you know, with the headings and the links highlighted, just to kind of help you understand what's going to be read out to screen readers and to users using screen readers when they're skipping between forms of content. So, you know, we get it. We get screen readers, great. So let's jump onto that first point on our list, which was same link text for different destinations. So I've got a couple of paragraphs up on screen, and you know, don't worry about the content, don't worry about reading it, it's not really that relevant. But it's just worth noting that there's some links scattered throughout these 2 paragraphs. So let's define link text, right? So link text is the, you know, specific words that you click on to follow a link. They're usually visualized by being a different color, and perhaps they're underlined, and that just helps them stand out and be different from the rest of the page content. Now, if we imagine that we are looking at these 2 paragraphs as a screen reader, well, we don't want to listen to the whole thing. So we just want to skip between the links so we can find out the destination of where we want to get to. The screen reader would actually read out the content like this. So now it's just showing the link text on screen. So it would literally just read out link, click here, link here, link, read more, link, click here. And you can see why this causes a problem, right? Because where on earth do these links lead to? We don't know. And that's an issue. So here's a quick game. We've got some link text on the left and some search engines that they link to on the right. And we want to try and match up the link text to the search engine that they link to. And that's how we win. And before you actually try, it's completely impossible. So I'll stop you because the link text itself is so non-descriptive and it's used multiple times, it could literally just link to anywhere. These are the answers, just in case you were wondering. So, we get it, right? We get that using non-descriptive and really generic link text multiple times and linking them to different places, we get that can be really unclear. So how do we solve it? What's the solution there? Well, first off, let's throw the words click here and read more in the bin. They are rubbish words for links. There's different variations. I don't know, learn more is a common one. But they're used all of the time. You know who you are. To be honest, I've used them a lot. I still do. But there is some solutions that we can implement here. My preferred solution is very simply to make the link text clear in terms of where it's linking to. Seems pretty obvious, but it just makes it clearer for everyone with or without disabilities. It's better for SEO, and it's not that difficult. Take this sentence, for example. Bins are collected fortnightly during local waste disposal center closures. Read more. Where does this read more link take us? Is it to information about fortnightly bin collection? Is it to info on disposal center closures? Is it a link to both? It's hard to say, right? Now, how about this sentence? Bins are collected fortnightly during local waste disposal center closures. Read more about your local bin collection days. By making that link text super clear, we can very easily tell where that link is going to take you. It can be understood by everyone, with or without a screen reader, and that's great, right? Now, you're probably looking at this and thinking the same thing as me, which was, oh, that's too long. I don't want my link to be that long. And, I get it. Sometimes you might be limited by space. So there is another solution, and that is ARIA attributes. So very similar to how alt text describes an image on a website, ARIA attributes on a link are going to describe some information about that link, like where it goes to. I'm showing a very similar example to before, but in the bottom there we have a sentence which says bins are collected fortnightly during local waste disposal center closures. Read more. And as a visual user, that's what you'd see. You'd have that lovely short link that we all want. But a screen reader would also read this ARIA attribute, which is this text that I have inside of some square brackets there. So it would actually read a link like, read more about your local bin collection days. That's perfect. It makes it easy to understand, right? So that's how a screen reader would read it, and it's not how a visual user would see it, so you can still have that short, sexy link. Now, this still doesn't quite fix the problem that this is a very poorly constructed sentence. So that's me. It's on purpose, but that's why I prefer that first solution compared to this. But to be perfectly honest, we use ARIA attributes quite a lot, even on the Silktide website. For our blog page, for example, has a bunch of blogs on it. We have the heading of the blog, we have a bit of an excerpt, and then we have a link below that says, kind of read more. And it works in context for a visual user, but for someone using a screen reader, they require those ARIA attributes. So we actually have those on our blog, which work great. So again, I've got some links here for some further reading. As a reminder, don't worry about transcribing them. You will get the slides. You can browse through them in your own time. If there's any issues with accessing them or whatever, just drop us an email and we'll sort you out. And also, feel free to ask questions in the Q&A bit of Zoom. Hopefully our slides won't crash when you do so. But we'll go ahead and answer as many as we can at the end of the session. So we've covered off that first point. Whew. Right, let's move on to PDFs. Boy, PDFs. I'm not a fan of PDFs, and I wrote a blog about this recently. You can read that on the Silktide website, but it's mainly just that PDFs just aren't very accessible. There's a real big reason why PDFs are always the top challenge when it comes to web accessibility. As a quick run through, PDFs are essentially a print screen of content. It can't be edited, it can be easily shared, and that is great. That's why we love PDFs. But because it doesn't actually contain any content, merely just a kind of image of the content, it causes so many accessibility challenges. And you'll see this if you ever try like to copy and paste from a PDF. it'll probably lose all of its formatting. It might spell stuff wrong. And it's because your computer's trying to guess what each letter is and then pasting it. So while computers are pretty good at guessing, they're not perfect. So if there's no content inside of a PDF, how can technology like a screen reader read through it? Well, it can't, at least not without some work. So what, why do we still use them then? Well, because they are so good at what they do. And interestingly, that's also what makes them bad. We love them because they're a static piece of content that's not edited, you can't edit it, and it's easy to share. That's fantastic. That's why we love them. That's why we all use them. But because of that, it makes them so bad for accessibility. If you've ever tried to read a PDF on a mobile device, you'll know exactly what I mean. You have to pinch to zoom, and then you've got to scroll left and right, and basically read each line one at a time. And it's a nightmare. And this is in WCAG, this is referred to as reflow. We'll talk a bit more about this later, but it's just a horrendous experience. And unfortunately, with PDFs, there's just no fix for this. And that's why really they can never really be fully accessible. But we can do some stuff about it, right? So how do we fix it? Well, one solution is to use some software. So we can use software like Adobe Acrobat, and that puts PDF through a process called tagging. And it's essentially, we're tagging pieces of content on a PDF and saying, hey, this paragraph is this text. And so really easy, just tells your computer what's what on a PDF. The problem is it's super complicated and it's a bit of a nightmare to do. If you ever tried to do it, then you can probably say, yeah, it's a bit of a pain. It's a bit of a chore, especially tables. Getting tables in a PDF to be accessible is just the worst. So now we do have a webinar about this on our website. If you do want to see a really in-depth look at how to do all of this with PDFs, you can go ahead and check that out. But yeah, that's one solution. You can also use software like Dania. So Dania is a piece of software that it plugs into Microsoft Office, and it just can help you save a lot of time. It just allows you to export your things like Word documents into fully accessible PDFs in a few clicks. So it's definitely worth checking it out if you're using PDFs a lot and if they're a common issue to get to be accessible. So you've taken the time, you've made your PDFs as accessible as possible, or as accessible as you can using software. But is that enough? As a final solution, why not consider making it an accessible web page alternative? Now, this probably seems like a bit of a cop-out solution. You might be thinking, oh, great, thanks, Adam. That's done more work for me. And I get it, but unfortunately, there's just no way to make PDFs 100% accessible. You're still going to be getting that kind of pinch and zoom 2D scrolling that goes on. And look, having said that, everyone uses PDFs. Like even we do, we hate them. They're just so good at doing what they can do. But again, their biggest strength is also their biggest strength is also their biggest weakness. And just since they're everywhere, we are not going to be saying goodbye to them anytime soon. So just make sure that you're using kind of available tools and software to make them as accessible as possible, and even consider having an alternative web page that's fully accessible too. Again, I've got some links here that you can go check out in your spare time. But yeah, let's move on. So we've ticked off two. Phew, those are the big ones. Don't worry if the next two are pretty swift. So let's move on to unclear focus states. If you don't know, a focus state shows a user what element of your site they currently have selected when they're using things like keyboard navigation, or essentially any other navigation to using a mouse. So a hover state is different, right? So a hover state is when you're using your mouse, you'll hover over a button or an image or whatever, anything that's interactable, and it might change color, it might animate slightly, and it looks nice, right? It looks very pretty. Focus state is not like that at all. Focus state is for keyboard navigation. It does not need to look nice and pretty. It needs to be big, bold, and clear, right? Because the only people who are ever going to see your focus state are the people who need to actually see it. So make it so they can see it. We'll take a little bit look in this in more detail in a bit when we're looking at what's coming in WCAG 2.2. There's a lot of interesting stuff there. So I'll call it there for kind of focus state bits, but that's just worth to be aware of. don't make them like hover states, make them clear. We have got some videos and a webinar again on this that you can go ahead and check out too. So go ahead and do that. And so, yeah, so that's 3 things off of our top 4 list. So finally on here, we've got scrolling in 2 dimensions. And, you know, I've already touched on this a little bit when I was talking about PDFs a minute ago. But scrolling in 2 dimensions, this is referred to as reflow in WCAG. So what it essentially means is that whenever you resize a window on your computer or like a mobile device, the content is resized so that it fits the current size better. It's like responsive websites, right? But reflow is all about like the content shuffling and reorganizing itself so that it's clearly visible and legible without needing to scroll in multiple directions, like those PDFs, like scrolling left and right and up and down at the same time. So if you're a user with low vision, and in order to, you know, to read some content, you need to kind of pinch and zoom in on your mobile, well, the text should reflow so that it still appears in a single column, and you only have to scroll down to read it, and not left, right, up, down, wherever. And again, you know, we've done a few bits on this in the past. You know, you can read up on in W3C about reflow, and we've done a bunch of stuff about 2D scrolling as well. So you can check that out on our YouTube channel. So phew, we've covered our top 4 list. We got there. I think slides are all still good. That's great. We made it. So, you know, let's just pretend that this says top 10. You know, the top 4 is so not catchy. Before we go ahead and talk about WCAG 2.2, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to the government design services. So this is a super great cheat tool for creating really consistent government websites that are accessible. So if you are building a new site, or if your site is in a complete shambles and needs a complete refresh, it's definitely worth taking a look at GDS, since it can help you cut a lot of corners. It's also worth noting that they update this quite regularly, at least right now. So it's worth taking a look at their updates, because they mention a lot of fixes, you know, that they've implemented to improve on accessibility. So you might be able to kind of draw some inspiration from there. I found that pretty cool. And importantly, they've got a form builder for accessible forms, and this is great. This is great news. Forms are a nightmare. They're always a common problem to get right when it comes to accessibility. So the fact that they have a form builder is great. So definitely check this one out if you're worried about your forms. So time for the big one, WCAG 2.2. Now, when it comes to WCAG 2.2, you may or may not, but you may see WCAG 2.2 as coming like this. This is a screenshot of Darth Vader marching through the Death Star, all ominous like. But instead of seeing WCAG 2.2 as this kind of scary thing that's on its way, instead we should be seeing it a little bit more like this. This is a field of a bunch of loving puppies that are all happy, and that's what we should see WCAG 2.2 as. It's a good thing. It should make us all happy, because it's about making the web better for everybody. So when's it coming? Well, it's scheduled to be completed and published in September this year. And I'm sure that will come around a lot faster than a lot of us would like. So what is coming? Well, you know, my colleague Jess, she's already done a webinar about this previously that covers everything in WCAG 2.2. So you can go ahead and check out that webinar recording if you want all of that juicy info. But in this webinar, again, we don't have a ton of time, so we're just going to be picking out some of the big ones and talking through some of those. There are also, of course, a bunch of AAA variations, but we're just going to be looking at the AA success criterion in this webinar. So first up, accessible authentication. This is about passwordless logins and alternative ways of logging into accounts and services. I've got a screenshot here from the National Cybersecurity Centre's blog, and it says, let them paste passwords, because it doesn't make your site any less secure. So allowing pasting into password fields is just one of these new requirements for WCAG 2.2, right? And I, for one, I'm very happy about that. I use a password manager to save all of my passwords because I have far too many. So this just helps me manage that in a much better way. So those requirements also include providing alternatives to things like cognitive function tests. So these tests, as an example, they're things like, you know, asking people to remember different usernames and different passwords, and transcribing codes from your mobile phone to your desktop or tablet, or calculations like 5 times 7, and a bunch of other kind of puzzles, recaptures with pictures, all of this sort of stuff. I'm sure we've all experienced examples of most of these. And I mean, they all produce cognitive burdens. As a quick side note here, name, email address, phone number, these are fine. You can expect people to remember this. It's basic personal information, so that's all okay. But yeah, all of these do produce still cognitive burdens. So we need some alternatives. Here's a screenshot of eBay, and it's almost there. I can click a button on the login screen that says "Need help signing in," and this will allow me to log into my account without a password. The problem is that it only offers to text me a code. So I'm trying to log in on my desktop. I'm not trying to log in on my phone, but I still have to get my phone, open up my text messages, find this 6-digit code, and then copy that and type that into my desktop. And there's just no workaround to that. That's just what I have to do if I want to log in. And this is an example of transcription. So we're taking content from one device and we have to retype it into another. And that's bad. It works a little bit better if you're just on mobile, because your phone might recognize a text message and automatically kind of populate the code for you. But if you're on a desktop device, there's no way around it. You've got to look at different devices, which is a nightmare. Steam does something very similar, but they don't just use numbers, they use letters too. So when you are entering in this code on something like your phone, you can't even have like a nice numerical keyboard layout that just shows you the numbers. Instead, it's got to be a full-on QWERTY keyboard. And again, it's just kind of putting more barriers in the way. What's worse with Steam is they don't even let you copy and paste the code, which is frustrating. And then there's PayPal as well, which, very similar to eBay, texts you these 6-digit codes that need to be transcribed. This is a more interesting one. This is Barclays, and while you can't ask people to remember a lot of things, you can give them their own chosen content. So this Barclays banking app actually asks you to set a phrase that you would recognize. And it warns you that if you don't see this phrase on screen, like your custom phrase, then it might not actually be their app. So that's pretty interesting, and an interesting way of allowing people to have their own chosen content. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows for Barclays. There's an example of a text message here, and it actually cuts off. So it says, "Do not share this code with anyone. Your secure OTP is 10," and then it cuts off. Great. So now I need to open up my text messages, and then I need to copy the code. And even if I can't paste the code in, then I need to try and remember the code and then go back and type it in, and just, horrendous. On the other hand, Amex sent us a text which reads American Express one-time password 524074. We can easily see it, so it's super easy for us to type in. It came up with a numerical keyboard as well to make it even easier. And what's more is this is one of those examples where it actually, the phone recognized the text message and the code and automatically pulled it through. So it's just a one tap, no transcription needed, just one tap, and it logs us in. One of the best solutions that we've seen for this is the magic link. So we're trying to log in, and we don't know our password. We can very easily click on a link that says "I need help logging in," and it will email us a magic link. And so we open up our email, we click that link, and it logs us in. End of. Easy peasy. So the only thing we need to remember is how to get into our own email, and as we said, that's fine. You can expect people to remember that personal information. So to summarize, just ensure that there's no transcription and make it as easy as possible for people to log in alternative ways. And it's that word alternative, phrase, alternative ways is super important here. The next thing is target size. This is a pretty big one to be aware of with WCAG 2.2. There's a number of things going on screen here. The following screenshots that you're seeing are actually taken from W3C themselves. And there's basically just a bunch of icons on screen. We're going to start with the second row down. So it's a row of different icons, and each of those icons is 24 by 24 pixels square, and they're just next to each other. And that would be a pass in WCAG 2.2. There's enough spacing, there's enough size that it's easy for us to tap on a mobile device or click on. So that's fantastic. And that's what all of this is about. Now, it's important to remember the number 24. 24 is the kind of magic golden rule for this. So below that, we have an example of the same icons, but instead these icons are now 20 by 20 pixels square. That alone would be a fail, but we do have a 4 pixel gap between those icons that adds up to 24 total, the 20 pixel icon and the 4 pixel gap. That adds up to 24, and therefore it is then a pass. And we've got an example at the bottom where it's just 20 pixels without that 4 pixel gap, and that would be a fail. So again, 24 is the magic number here, but it's also worth thinking about how that can affect your layout on a page. So these aren't to scale, by the way. Obviously we've zoomed them in, so they're not super tiny on the webinar screen. But we've got an example at the top of 4 icons that are 24 by 24 pixels square. And sure, you can make them smaller, but that means that the gaps around them have to compensate. So it can end up meaning that you're using up far more screen real estate than you would if you just kept them at 24 pixels. So the example below that right there is actually icons, the same 4 icons, but they're 10 pixels by 10 pixels square. But in order for us to meet that 24 pixels criteria, we need to add on an extra 14 pixels to the top, to the left, to the right, to the bottom. We need to add in that extra spacing all around so that we then get 24 pixels in total, which is our magic number and gives us that pass. So this is a big one. You can experiment with it in different ways, but obviously just be aware that changing that spacing can often mean that it's taking up more real estate on your screen. And spacing matters. Again, 24 pixels, golden number. I'm sorry to keep shouting 24 at you, but this is the same principle applied, but using line height. So we have a list of names here, and the example on the left has a line height of over 24 pixels. So that's great, that's a pass. And the example on the right has a line height of less than 24 pixels. I think it's like 16. So that is a fail. But as a visual user, I think taking a step back and looking at this anyway, I think that the one on the left just looks better. So, I don't know, maybe that's just me. I just think that it genuinely looks better, and that's worth considering too. We see it again in a drop-down menu, this one using cell padding. So it makes such a big difference. We have an example on the left with each cell's height being 24 pixels, and then the example on the right being less than that for each cell, and that would be a fail. And it makes such a big difference. It's 4 pixels for each cell, and I don't know, visually, it makes such a huge impact. I think it's way easier, way nicer to look at. And you can tell it's going to be easier to tap on when it's 24 pixels. So that's that one. Let's look at focus appearance. So if you remember when we spoke about focus states a little bit earlier on, I said we'd speak about it in a little bit more depth. This is that bit. So the point of this in WCAG 2.2 is to define the minimum rules for what focus state should be. And that's great. It's nice to have that definition of what we should be aiming for. The slight issue is that I think that this is too gentle and it makes it far more complicated than it needs to be. Let me show you. So there's a few examples. Again, these were taken from W3C. These are examples of focus states that would pass the requirements as the draft version of WCAG 2.2 requires. And unfortunately, I just kind of don't think that it's good enough. And I don't think that I'm being picky here. Tell me if I am. But the focus states, at this size, they're zoomed in, they're quite big, they look kind of good, right? They look fine because they're big. Here's another one from W3C, and it's an example of 5 stars, and there's a focus state around the star in the middle there. It's got a 1 pixel border around its edge. And that means, by WCAG 2.2, at least right now, from what we know in the draft stage, that means that it's all good. That's fine. But the problem is we're not going to see, stars at this side on a website. In reality, in the context of a website, these stars are going to be like, what, a quarter of this size? A really good way to test if your focus states stand out enough and to kind of simulate low vision is to simply squint. So I want you to all, I know it sounds a bit silly, a little crazy if you're in an office, but I want you to all go ahead and just squint for me. Now, tell me which star has the focus state. How many stars can you see? Because for me, when I'm squinting, the 2 stars on the right completely disappear. The focus state is like practically impossible for me to perceive. And so you can, you can tell what I'm getting at here. Like that's just far too general, and it's not good enough. These are some screenshots here from our Don't Be Afraid of Keyboard Navigation video. Find that on YouTube. But the point that the video is making at this point is that your focus state needs to be a big, bright, bold, contrasting color. It's not about being pretty. Again, I hate to bang this drum several times, but the only people that are going to see your focus state are the people that need to see it. So make sure that they can. It's about being functional here. So I just want to do another quick demonstration here. So if you can, I want you all to close your eyes just for a second. Don't worry, I'm not going to shout boo and scare you or anything like that. But when I ask you to open your eyes, you're going to see a web page. And I want you to tell me, or basically see how fast you can see and find where we are on the page. So where our focus is, right? So keep them closed, and hopefully the slides won't crash. Go ahead and open them. I'll tell you where we are on the page. I think that most of us can see where we are, just thanks to that super vibrant and bold kind of red box that we've got there. And that's why it matters. Like if you get distracted, if you're, the phone rings, the doorbell goes, how on earth do you know where you are? On top of that, if we test this out, do the exact same test that we did with those stars, let's go ahead and squint. If we squint, can you see the focus state? Well, yeah, even at this size, right? So this is why it's so important. This is what the minimum should be. We need to stop making exceptions so that designers can put tiny little lines or dotted things or drop shadows. It's not about being pretty. It's about being functional, and it's about being easier, about it being all easier for people who need it and require it. So, of course, why does it matter? Why are we looking at this now? Why is it worth looking at this now? Well, when WCAG 2.2 releases, it's obviously not going to be required by law, at least not right away, but it will happen. So get ahead of the curve, prepare for it now, and save yourself time when it gets to that mad dash. So just remember that these guidelines, think of the puppies, right? These guidelines are here for a reason. They're about making the web a better experience for absolutely everybody. It's not about doing, giving more work to people. It's just about making it better for everyone, which is good. And that, after our enough slide issues that we've had, that about wraps up our session for today. So I hope it's been useful. I hope there's been some takeaways. Again, we'll be sharing both the recording of this session and the slides over to you over email too. So keep an eye out for those. As an extra, we've got a bunch of videos on things that we've covered in this webinar in a bit more detail, and some other bunch of stuff as well. So if you want to go ahead and check those out, you can on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/silktide. And also, like I mentioned earlier, we do have that free Chrome plugin. So if you want to test out how a screen reader works on your site, it's very easy to kind of just implement, scroll through your site, hit tab a few times, and just see if there's any issues there and better identify them. So go ahead and check that out. And obviously, if you want a hand tackling accessibility challenges across your website, we are always happy to chat. We already work with a bunch of UK councils, and so if you want a custom report for your website, do feel free to reach out either on our website at silktide.com/request-a-demo, or by dropping an email to Ben, who will be sharing the recording of this session and the slides, everything like that with you. So yeah, that wraps us up for today. I think we've still got a little bit of time, so let's go ahead and look at a bit of a Q&A. So I'm joined by Jess, who you've been hearing in the background, looking after me and chatting to you guys in the chat, and making sure that the slides are running smoothly. So thank you, Jess. She's here to answer any questions too. So if you do have any, please drop them in the Q&A box. Yeah. So have we got any questions, Jess, that you want to pick up on?
We do, actually. We have a few that have come in. So we'll start at the top. The first question was, do ARIA attributes work in newsletters? The answer to that is more complicated than you might think, because it's going to depend on what format your newsletter is using, right? Is this going out via email and is then getting rendered inside an email? Because that's just generally horrible for everyone. Trust me on this one. If you're sending them a link and your newsletter is, say, a PDF or it's an HTML page you're sending them to, then it should work, right? But this is what I mean. Like, it's a tough question to answer because there's a number of variables going on. It ties into the next question, which is that they heard ARIA labels don't work on many screen readers, even JAWS. There is, at least last year, I think we were looking at like 83% coverage of the ARIA attributes. Sorry, getting distracted because people are putting things into chat. So realistically, most of them should be covering it, right? Like specifically the ARIA label for links seems to have fairly decent coverage. The problem you're going to find with ARIA, and honestly, it's just kind of a problem across accessibility right now, is that it's less that the screen reader doesn't recognize it, and it's more about how the browser interprets it. Yeah, awesome, right? So you get a different experience if you use JAWS with Internet Explorer than you do if you say use JAWS with Chrome. Fabulous. Love this nonsense. God forbid we do anything that's universal, ever. It's like the browser wars are back. If you're old like me and you remember like, oh, this one has marquee and that one has blink, and like they're not the same. But one of the things that Lola continued with was to say only the most up-to-date versions can use them. Cost implications for users. We're just going to take a moment and have a little rant about JAWS. You can get NVDA for free, right? It's just not as good. You can get, if you own a Mac, which is a limiting factor in no uncertain terms, VoiceOver is one of the best options for screen readers out there, but that has a cost implication because you need a Macintosh computer, right? No Apple, no VoiceOver. So if you're a Windows user like me, your options are Narrator, that's built in and it's kind of, no offense, Microsoft, I know you're trying. NVDA, which is actually open source and free and built by volunteers, which is kind of amazing when you think about it, or JAWS, which really is the Rolls Royce of screen readers and is actually kind of amazing in many ways. However, if you live in the US, you can get JAWS with automatic updates for $100 a year as a subscription. No, I'm not kidding. $100. If you were in the UK, it costs £850 to buy the software, and you don't get updates. If you do want the updates every time you want them, it's about £250. As you might imagine, if you need a screen reader, your life is probably difficult in a number of other ways too. So the cost implications are severe. I don't know that that means you shouldn't use ARIA. I think it's something that if you want your like read more links and things like that, it's one of the only ways to implement it properly. And I think as time goes by, there is more adoption. But the reality is, like, Freedom Scientific is just a bit evil over here. I'm going to say it. It's the kind of thing where I guess everyone here is local councils. It's something you guys might want to think about, because it is really expensive. But the reality is, like, everyone I know that uses a screen reader, they were introduced to one, and that's the one they're used to. So getting them to switch is actually a huge ask. Yeah, and if they were taught to use JAWS, then that is what they're familiar with. They know all the shortcuts because they're different across all of them. So it's something that the government might actually want to look at in terms of like how you can support people that need it, because it is really expensive. And as you said, if you're looking at a situation where we're moving forward on the internet and the web and adding things like ARIA, and say JAWS 11 doesn't support that because it wasn't around then, that's a problem. Right. Done talking about that. The next question was, is it okay to create an accessible web page, but include a PDF alternative of it for printability reasons? That's actually a really awesome question, because that's one of the benefits to PDFs is you know how they're going to print. Right? You're like, here it is. This is the format. It's good, right? I think that's actually a really interesting idea. I would still recommend that you do everything you can to make that PDF accessible. So whether you're using Acrobat or Dania or whatever software you choose, make sure you've done everything you can for the PDF. But I don't think that's actually a problem, especially because what we generally recommend is the opposite, right? You give everyone PDFs and you give them the HTML alternative to be like, here is your totally accessible option. So like, you know, your screen reader will be fine. You know that that version can be zoomed in and all the other things people might need. So that was a good question, in my opinion. Made me think. So in the chat, I see we've recently been advised not to use duplicate headings on the page, even if those headings are nested under headings that are different. This is not covered in WCAG. It isn't. The only time they look for duplication is links. And that's because if you're tabbing through the links, right, and you're hearing, you know, link contact us, and then say maybe 10 links later you hear link contact us, that better go to the same place. Otherwise, like, I'm going to have no way to know that your contact us page for that is different. There's no context for the links, right? So like, you have to be really careful that they don't have the same text but go different places. When it comes to the headings being the same, I think it's an interesting one. I would also be curious, like, what the content is that your headings are duplicating on the same page, and what is that doing to your SEO? Because that seems a bit odd. But trust me on this one, it's currently not covered. WCAG is a funny one. I definitely recommend people take a look at it and work to their standards, but looking outside of it, right? Because it doesn't necessarily cover everything. It can't, you know, and there are things that you might want to do that would just be better that they don't have rules for. Next question is, with 2.2 guidelines on the way, when's the guess on them becoming mandatory? That's a fantastic question. I don't even know if they're going to make the September thing. So, it's still in draft. My guess, because again, this is a guess, is that I would expect 6 months to a year before it became law. Like, because think about it, you have to like say, okay, we've set them in stone. This is now 2.2, which hasn't happened yet, right? So they're still in draft. They're still figuring it out and making adjustments. So they say, here it is. These are the new rules, right? You're going to need time. Like, everyone's going to need just a little bit of time to go, oh my word, you know, all these things are different. They need to be implemented. The reason we're drumming on about it now, and I did a full hour on this and Adam's talking about it too, is that it matters, and the things they're trying to tell you to do, we should probably be doing them, right? Like, do we really need to wait until this is now the law, you know, or can we start making some adjustments now and get ahead of it, you know, because these things matter? Yeah. I don't know if that actually answered the question, but I don't think anyone's 100% sure. I feel like I'm on QI where they're like, nobody knows. Yeah, see, I might be American, but I've been here a while. Okay, the pop culture references.
Cool. All right. Well, I don't think we've got any more questions coming through. If we do, if we've missed any questions, because I need to look through the chat and everything. If we've missed any questions, we'll just get in touch with you following this anyway, when we send you the slides and the recording. So we can go ahead and answer any questions there. I hope that you enjoyed the webinar. Thank you very much, Jess, for you know, for answering some questions there, and thank you everyone for coming today. So you can go ahead and have 7 minutes back to your day. So thanks everybody.